Jack, how does one get started developing their own private practice?
Okay, let's start out with, you're now prepared. You've got your degree, you've got your skills, you've got CC-AASP where you're working on it, and now you're stepping out into the real world and you want to do private consulting. So, good question, how do you get started? I think the first thing that you do is you sort of do a self-assessment and look at what do you do really well, what are you qualified to do. The second question is, what are you really interested in working with? Okay, what kind of population do you just feel excited and comfortable working with? And then what's out there? And that has a lot to do with your geographic location. For example, I've been based in Cleveland, and I discovered early in my career that there are 13 or 14 competitive figure skating clubs that compete. So there's a wide audience, If I were in Wichita, Kansas, I don't know, there might not be any or one or two. So you really have to look at what's out there, okay? Then you need to sort of how do you target and get known by these groups? And one of the things that's very helpful is not to approach it individually, figure skaters, for example, but find out how is that sport organized in your community. And I sort of stumbled into it after working with a few figure skaters. I realized that there was a figure skating council of coaches. And there were about 60 coach members, and they met once a month, and they had meetings, and like a lot of other groups like that, they were always looking for speakers. So I got myself on the docket and had the opportunity to give a 1-hour talk to 60 figure skating coaches and began to network, with them. The other thing that I did is once I found that organization, I asked if I could become an associate member. And they said, we don't have such a category. I said, well, create one. I said, I'll pay full dues, which was very modest. And so I became the only non-figure skating coach to belong to that organization without voting rights and that sort of thing. But that got me on their newsletter. It got me on their members directory. And periodically they would call me, and I became sort of their informal sports psychologist. The other thing that's very helpful is once you do start working with an athlete, whatever sport they might be in, if you, let's just say tennis, for example, if the athlete feels comfortable, you begin to work a nice relationship with the tennis coach. If the athlete is not concerned about confidentiality or anything like that, you get out of the office and you go to the court with an appointment with the coach, and you watch what he or she does, and then you present what you're doing, and you see if there's any way you can be helpful to them. And I found that with all the coaches that I've worked with, I provide them with free consultations. So any tennis coach or figure skating coach or whatever who's running into a possible problem, give me a call. And I'll give them 10 or 15 minutes on the phone. Sometimes I'll invite them to come over to the office and just have coffee and get to know me a little bit. So there are a lot of opportunities out there. You can also write short articles for newsletters. Most sporting organizations, particularly on the community level, are always looking for someone to write a column on, choking under pressure and how you can avoid it and stuff like that, to get your name out there. I have stumbled into it, but I strongly recommend, considering that the high school age athlete is just a prime audience for our services. So often young people want to work with professional athletes, they want to work with Olympians, but there's so few of those in number. When you look at the pyramid at the very top, those elite athletes are few in number. Very often they don't need so much from us because they wouldn't be there if they didn't already have some of these skills. So those athletes who are aspiring to that level are the ones we can really help so they make it there. The other thing, that high school athletes, there are so many of them in any community, and they turn over 100% every 4 years. So that's a great audience, too.
And Jack, do you think there's any advice you could give on the specific business side of sports psychology?
I guess, first of all, recognizing that it is a business. And a business means that you have to invest and you have overhead. If you're just starting out, one of the ways to get into it without a lot of overhead, is to do some office sharing. And when I started out, I called some of the psychologists in my area and said, do you have any office space available? And they said, oh yeah, after these certain hours it's available for a very modest rent. I was able to rent. Then you get a business card with an office address, an office phone number, and those kinds of things, which is very professional. So the more you can share these business resources, the more you don't have to earn just to pay your bread and butter overhead.